Hi everyone, I'm Jagravi Singh, and this is Race to 2030. Today's episode is about Goal 2, which is Zero Hunger. The pandemic has caused many food shortages in developing countries such as Yemen, South Sudan, Eritrea, etc. This is mainly because of the restrictions that have been put in place from the pandemic. It's not just the pandemic that's making it harder to achieve zero hunger, but the climate crisis as well. Through harsh droughts and floods, it can be hard to feed an entire population. Therefore, to discuss this matter further, I will be speaking to one of my social studies and most recently my AP Human Geography teacher, Miss Anna Fisher. I learned with her for 2 years, and she is a deeply passionate educator as she continually helps students reach their full potential. She helped me a lot during my time as an AP Human Geography student and gave me tips or advice which did pull my grades up. I'm delighted that I got to speak with her, and I know her views matters a lot. Please listen on, and I hope you learn more. Before this pandemic was ever known to the world, food insecurity was already on the rise, mainly due to high population. My question to you is, even with the high population, how is everybody supposed to be fed fairly?
So as far as my research is concerned, we produce enough food in the world to feed everyone. The problem that we have is with distribution and moving that food around. So I think we need to focus on improving how we distribute food around the world rather than how we are growing it.
Since zero hunger is part of the Sdgs, otherwise known as the Sustainable Development Goals, how do you think governments all around the world should respond to this goal so that it can be achievable?
Well, since the problem is with distributing food across international borders, I think it's important for individual governments to support organizations that transcend geopolitical boundaries. So groups like the UN need the backing of individual governments because they specifically focus on programs that can help with this.
The climate crisis is obviously making the goal harder to achieve since many animals and we are getting impacted by it. We can see the situation in the central part of this country where people are begging on organizations to send them food products since they are getting hit hard from the continuous floods and disasters. My question is, should organizations keep working to feed the people affected by climate change, especially when we live in a world where climate change is creating significant impacts in the world?
So we should definitely be feeding people. I think it's pretty unfair to say some people get food and some people don't. But we should also be instituting strict regulations against climate change. That should be a focus of governments, that should be a focus of individuals. And we should also be looking at increasing things like sex education to help limit population growth. So over time, those would all work together to sort of correct these problems.
As you may know, conflicts, diseases, or even the climate crisis can have a big impact on children. Many of them might miss out on their education and most likely become undernourished. This is a big issue around the Middle East and South Asia. So can you tell me how the World Food Program or Unicef is supposed to help them?
So member states need to make sure that they're living up to the expectations and fulfilling their responsibilities to these programs. And the programs, if their focus is on providing food, need to continue to do that. Unfortunately, education isn't on them. That's the responsibility of hopefully other organizations that we can create. But because education has been affected so much by COVID, it's going to negatively impact an entire generation of children. So I think it is important for the world to step back and look at what programs do we need to help correct that. Not rely on groups like the World Food Program, who obviously already have their plate full, no pun intended,
Yes.
with trying to fix a different problem.
Lastly, this pandemic has obviously caused a lot of problems for this goal, especially with the high numbers of unemployment. Therefore, can you tell me how in the future we will ever reach a point where everyone is fed fairly?
So I don't actually think we will ever reach a point where it's completely even and fair distribution across the planet, and I think a lot of that will be due to political factors. We're definitely not at a place as a society globally where we can make decisions for the greater good. I think that's been evident. We have more problems now than ever in terms of the world being politicized and becoming more polarized and farther apart. So I would say that we are not moving in the direction of everybody being fed, even though that would be a valuable goal to have.
Just one follow-up question, or last question I have is, as a whole, what do you think of the SDGs?
I think they're valuable goals. I think the problem is when we have many long-term goals, especially when combined with all of the other goals that individual countries have, it's harder to stay focused on achieving them. So I think that it's important for us to prioritize those goals, because as we've seen in classrooms or at organizations, setting many goals is admirable, that you've identified all the things to fix, but the achievability goes down as the number of goals goes up, and the farther out the timeline, the harder it is to make concrete steps actually happen.
Thank you, Miss Anna. I enjoyed talking to you today.
Of course, thank you.
Well, that's it for my second episode. I'll be back on episode 3, which is good health and well-being. Whatever thoughts, opinions, or views you came up with during the interview, please type them down in the comment section. Also, if you have any questions about this topic, podcast, or for myself, please type them down too. I'll be glad to answer them. I hope you all enjoyed this interview. Thank you all and see you all soon.